her life of enslavement. If you were to read the slave narratives or the slave accounts, what is the worst thing they said a slave master or an enslaver could do to them? The worst, the most heartfelt thing.
Break the spirit.
That's right. You said it? Who said it first? You get a button. And it's the separation of families. Absolutely. Why do we mention this? Harriett Tubman has one famous narrative, and that's when she was here in 1855 in St. Catharines. She told the Boston abolitionists that when she was younger, she recalled two sisters being carried off in a chain gang. And she said, every time I saw a white man, meaning come onto the plantation, she was afraid of being taken away. So it was the separation of family, the trauma, and it was generational trauma as well. Then, number two that we touch on, Harriett Tubman was a tweener, so between the age of 12 and 15. She's instructed by her enslaver to accompany the plantation cook to the dry goods store. They get to the dry goods store in Bucktown, Dorchester County, Maryland. There is an overseer trying to apprehend a young black male. He asked Tubman to help him. She said no. She blocked his path. He picked up a 2-pound weight, threw it at the young black male, and it struck Harriett Tubman in the head. Missed the young man. She had a piece of skull pressing against her brain for the rest of her life. She said there was nothing but a constant humming noise going off in her head. Sometimes it would become so severe she'd pass out or blackout. Back then they called it sleeping spells. Scholars and physicians today recognize it as temporal lobe syndrome. Harriett Tubman was an epileptic and she was suffering for seizures. Yeah, so Harriett Tubman had a severe disability. Because she said when she first received that injury, it took 3 months for her to recuperate. During that time, in and out of a conscious state, there was one time she woke up, her enslaver was trying to sell her off. She recalled one white man saying, this wench is need more than half a sixpence because of her injury. So back then it was pounds and shillings and pences. So if you were to Google that, depending on whatever site you come to, Harriett Tubman's value was less than 20 cents. Half a sixpence ranges between 20 cents and 50 cents today. Yes. So Harriett Tubman's married to John Tubman. He never shares her dream of freedom of going north. It's 1849, her enslaver dies. We know the system was called chattel slavery. Black people didn't own themselves. They were owned by white people. The only thing white people did not own or control for black folks was the thoughts in their head. Couldn't read their thinking. But everything else was monitored and controlled. Harriett Tubman and her 2 brothers learned that after the enslaver dies, the widow must clear the plantation debt. First thing they would do, sell off their human property. The 3 of them are selected. Her husband still won't go north, so the 2 brothers and Harriet escape. Then the brothers force her to turn back. Why? They did not want to leave their loved ones behind. Here's a replica of the escape, the reward poster. Each, if apprehended in the state of Maryland, were valued at $100. That's over $3,600 today, returned. So they go back. The 2 brothers, they're safe. They're not going to be sold. But Harriet, she's still going to be sold. Her husband won't go north with her, so she escapes on her own. She makes it to a white woman's house who scholars believe was a Quaker. That woman gives her instructions to make it to the next safe house, and then from there, Harriet makes her way to Philadelphia. That was the fall of 1849. She hopped on the Underground Railroad on her own, by herself, under the cover of darkness, making her way to Philadelphia by following the North Star. She's in Philadelphia, September 1850, the U.S. government passes the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act. A few months later, it's December 1850, she learns that her niece Keziah Jolly Boley and Keziah's 2 children are going to be sold on the Cambridge auction block. She comes up with a plan with Keziah's free black husband. So Harriett Tubman's husband was also a free black man. That's one of the reasons he would not go north with her, because he's living in Maryland, he's free and he's privileged. Keziah's husband, he's also a free black man. He's there, he's privileged, he's a mariner. But the difference is, he's going north with his wife, and he doesn't want her sold south so that he can't see her or his kids again. So they come up with a plan. He bids on his family, $200 apiece. Something weird happens the day of the sale. The auctioneer and the seller, they go to lunch. When they come back, the 3 who were placed in an area known as the slave pen had disappeared. Somebody broke them out. They were placed on a skiff under the cover of darkness. his road up to Chesapeake. They met Tubman in Baltimore. She guides them to Philadelphia. That's rescue number 1. Rescue number 4. If you've seen the Harriett Tubman movie, you know that she went back to collect her husband. They've been separated for 2 years, and she even bought him a suit. He still wouldn't go north with her. She's pleading with him, trying to persuade him. He will not go. Then he finally tells her, "I've married a free woman by the name of Caroline." Tubman said, rather than raise a ruckus and put herself at risk as she was angry, she dropped them at her heart, gathered an unidentified group, guided them to Philadelphia. Then she went back a short while later. It's now December 1851. This is her 5th rescue. And that's when she collects a group of 11 freedom seekers and extends her Underground Railroad route to Canada. So she guided the 11 to St. Catharines. Frederick Douglass, the most famous black abolitionist of the 19th century. Understood the power of the pen. He operated the North Star. He published that newspaper and 2 others. And he also was the most photographed person of the 19th century, more than Abraham Lincoln. After the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law passed, he wrote in 1881 that the highest number of freedom seekers he ever sheltered at his home in Rochester was 11. And scholars believe that's the group Harriett Tubman guided to St. Catharines. This is St. Catharines, downtown St. Paul Street, 1860. So that's what it looked like when Tubman was here. This is the St. Paul Street Methodist Church. Today it's known as Silver Spire Church. So they were all an all-white congregation, but they're still our sister church because they're Methodist. They financially contributed to the construction of this church. And this is the downtown courthouse. It still stands today. It was constructed between 1848 and 1849. Courthouses doubled as jails back then, but it also was part of the lecture circuit. So the who's who in the lecture circuit would rail against enslavement there as well. The Underground Railroad truly began after 1793. If somebody was enslaved in the United States and they crossed the Niagara or Detroit River and set foot on British soil, they were automatically free. And that's because here we passed the Act to Limit Slavery in 1793. So those who were still enslaved at that time period in Canada would remain enslaved for the rest of their lives. Their children would be set free at the age of 25. Their grandchildren would be born free. But no more importing people of African descent to be used as slaves, and anybody escaping from bondage in the United States, once you set foot on British soil, you're automatically free. Harriett Tubman's here, it's 1851. We know, just like in the movie, she was cutting down trees in the timber forest here in Canada. However, she was doing it here in the middle of winter. So that's how she gained her strength and endurance here, as she did in Maryland, cutting down trees and hauling logs. Now, it's the summer of 1852. The only thing black folks couldn't escape when they arrived was racism. They didn't need white people here to vouch for them to purchase property. They didn't need white folks to vouch for them to own a business or to vote or to do anything. If somebody assaulted them, black or white, you just go to law enforcement and have them charged. Happened all the time. Here, 1852, black men are participating in the Militia Day Parade. They're wearing red coats. Not all white men appreciated that. They're being pelted with rocks and bottles, called derogatory names. After the parade's over, the black men go to the Justice of the Peace and they want these white men charged. The Justice of the Peace pushes back and says, forget about it. It's the Militia Day Parade. Just go celebrate. Well, they didn't do that. They came down here, back to the colored village, so predominantly black, outskirts of town, and they start drinking. Then they go back downtown, St. Paul Street, find these white men in Stinson's Tavern, and the brawl begins inside the tavern. Then it spills out to the street. Then the white men recruit their friends, the fire department or the fire brigade. Then, of course, they come down here and burn down the colored village. 97% of the homes are lost, but the 2 churches are left standing. We know that happened a lot in the United States. Then it happened here in other parts of Canada. But one difference, major difference, this guy, I mentioned him upstairs, Niagara's leading white male abolitionist, William Hamilton Merritt. So he was a member of Parliament, like a senator, the founder of the Welland Canal, and he was the brainchild behind the construction of the railway suspension bridge that connects Niagara Falls, New York, and Niagara Falls, Ontario. Him and his abolitionist friends here, and I should mention Merritt was also an entrepreneur, a businessman. Him and his abolitionist friends here said the destruction of the colored village was not acceptable, and the black community was compensated for their loss, and their homes were rebuilt in a year's time. So that's the difference, yeah. And that's the most racialized event ever to take place here in St. Catharines.